Hey everybody, happy Monday. Good to see so many familiar faces here. Welcome. We're going to give a few minutes for everybody to join. If you haven't printed out yet, print out your little worksheet. If you don't have it printed out, you can just follow along and write down on a piece of paper that you have handy. So we're going to give a few minutes for everybody to join us. Let me know in the chat where you're calling in from today, or zooming in from, I should say. Hey, Annie. I know sometimes I don't wear my glasses. I'm just trying to get better at it. This is one of my goals this year. I have a pair for seeing far and for seeing close. These are more just like blue blockers. Temecula, Denver, North Carolina, Tennessee. There's some new faces. I'm so happy to see you all. Pearl City, Hawaii. Wow. Montana, Frozen. Maryland, Chicago. So great to see you all. La Quinta, Port Orchard, Washington. I didn't know exactly where you were from. I knew you were there. Oxford, Denver. Hey, everybody. Hey, Erwin's here. Long time no see, friend. It's good to see you all. Well, today we are going to talk about making a color story. And first, if you don't know who I am, because I know some of you are in my membership, and that is called, let me see if I can mute this sound, sorry. I don't know, can you guys all hear that every time someone comes in? See if that works. Okay. Can you hear me still? Okay. So, yeah, my name is Chico, and I am a design educator. I'm a color expert. You might know me from Immersion or Flourish with Bonnie Christine. You might know me from Skillshare. You might know me from Instagram. So I'm in many places. So I'm getting ready to launch Color Camp. And if you stay with me here at the end, I'll talk a little bit more about that. And I might give you a little special code to jump in. Hey, Lola. And so I'm really excited for Color Camp coming up. I had my first one last year, and I'm doing it again this year twice. So we're doing winter session starting next week, and it's going to be a lot of fun. I've added some more lessons, so I'm excited about that. But today we're going to talk about creating a color story. And this is something that I see a lot in the surface design community, especially with beginning designers, is not having a color story that aligns with the story that you're trying to tell. So I read um, so many kind of like really elaborate stories. Let's say there's a story about going to the beach and their first time going to the beach, and they see seashells and they see the ocean and the horizon and all these things. And then I look at the collection and there's all these blacks and grays and these things that don't align visually with the story that I'm reading. And that goes further into, beyond just color. It goes into the actual patterns and design sometimes as well. So that's something to always be aware of, is that a picture's worth 1,000 words, and a color's part of that picture. And you should be telling the same story in your designs or illustrations or collections that you're trying to tell us in the paragraph that you're writing to describe your story. Or even if it's for a brand, if it's in, the 5 keywords that you're trying to develop for that brand, what do those colors you're picking for that brand signify? How do they show up psychologically for people when they think about your brand? So color goes a long way in our designs. It's one of the most important elements of design. So today, what we're going to do is we're going to do a few exercises together, and we're going to develop a color palette together. So if you have your little sheet worked out here, what we're going to do is we're going to come up with a story together. And it's just going to be really quick. It's not going to be anything, detailed. We're just doing a little workshop here today. So let me go into share my screen here. All right. Can everybody see that? Can give me thumbs up if you can see it. Yeah, I see head shaking. Okay, we're good. All right. So when you come up with a color palette, there's so many different ways to start coming up with a color palette. And one of the one of the easiest ways or obvious ways to do it is to come up with a literal direction. So here's a pattern design that I did about a jaguar. And there's a bigger story behind it that it connects to the stars at night and da 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 da. But you can see that I'm literally pulling out color that's literal from the story. The jaguar is yellow and it has black spots and it has red mouth. So I'm pulling out these literal colors to use in my palette. Now, I'm tweaking them a little bit because it's not that color of yellow. It's not primary yellow. It's not primary red. There are other subtleties in the actual animal. But here, I'm an artist, so I can interpret the color the way that I want. But I'm starting with a literal reference. And then what I want to do is add supporting harmonies with tints and shades. So here I'm just going and I'm finding a primary color relationship and starting there. And then I'm tweaking the color to create new shades that can work together. So you can see in the background of the pattern, there's a subtle tone on tone kind of repeat pattern back here. And that's what's doing it is the fact that I have these two tints and shades that are very close to each other, but they work off of each other. And then I always like to add some unexpected colors into my color palette. So what colors work with these other colors that I've chosen, but I use them in more sparing ways. And they pop up to add more interest in my color palette and not to be, it makes my color palette more unique, more original, and it differentiates my color palette from other people. And so that's why I like to always add a little unexpected twist into my color palette. Now here you can see is a very, very simple color palette. And this is something that when I did the original sketch in Procreate, I was just kind of working with red and blue really quickly. And I kind of liked where it was going, but I wanted to refine the color palette. So I started with a really basic dyad relationship of two colors of red and blue, which seem really obvious, but I tweaked those colors so they aren't just the primary red and blue. The red's slightly more pinkish by adding a little bit more blue into it. And then the blue I've kind of softened so it's not so hard. And then that makes a little bit softer relationship. And then I brought in the pink to complement those two. And then I created a lighter version of that pink. And when I create tints, so a tint is when you add white to a color, and a shade is when you add black to color. And when I create tints, I always start with the same color here. So this pink is actually a tint of this red, and this pink is a tint of this pink. So I'm always starting with the same root color, and that creates more harmony within my palette when it creates less dissonance if you don't have another underlying color. The pink could start to tint to purple, or it could start to tint to orange. So that's why I always use the root color when I'm creating a color palette. So this color palette came actually from this door that I passed all the time in my walk. So I found the inspiration here. And I didn't literally pull the colors from this picture, but this picture inspired what I was seeing. And so what you want to do is you want to find something that inspires you when you're creating a color palette. And it could just be one thing, it could be a full picture, but it comes from learning to observe color better and finding observations and relationships and kind of understanding more what you appreciate when you see color. what you're able to appreciate about it and why you're appreciating it. Once you start to understand those, your color confidence will start to build more. And so what I was seeing here was this relationship in color, this blue and red, and the red wasn't quite red, and the blue was a little, this is more of a true blue to the picture, but it really, this red wasn't exactly what I needed for my collection. I needed something with a little bit more oomph. And so I, tweaked it. I'm an artist, I can do what I want, I can tweak it, but this was the original inspiration for the color. And then I expanded my palette by introducing these pinks. And you can see that when we go back to the other one, that you don't need a lot of colors to, oops, too far. You don't need a lot of colors to make something work. It's just really choosing the right colors with the right amount of contrast that can complement with each other and using them in the right way. You can see here in the detail, there's a fine dot with the light color. And that's because the dot has enough contrast with the color before it. But yet this color here has enough contrast with the color before it. So they can all work almost independently as different colors and create different levels of contrast. And contrast and value are probably one of the most important things that you can understand when you're creating a color palette. So whenever you create a color palette, you might start from your explorations. And this is something that I do personally all the time, is I go out and I play with things and find things and take pictures of them. And this was a piece that I did for Uppercase magazine that was just in the most recent edition of Uppercase. And it was an issue about color. And I was wanting to play with a pink and orange color palette. So I went to the market and I bought all of these fruits and all of these things, and I put on some music and I sat down and had an exploration session. And the whole way I'm taking different pictures, because if you just stop and look at the fruit and say, oh, it's orange, well, what orange is it? How do you determine what orange it is? How do you get to understand the differentiations between those subtleties of color? How do you get to limit yourself to just looking at the outside of the orange and not opening it up and seeing what the inside layers have? Or juicing the orange and seeing what color the juice becomes? Like all of these things, like you can see a little blob here. This is like a syrup that I made with Jamaica flowers. And actually that's one of the flowers there. But the flower started out more of like kind of this color here. But after I boiled it, it turned this kind of blackish color. And so I'm saving all these things and experimenting the whole time, kind of just trying to discover, what lies there, what lies beneath. So my first color palette that I pulled were using these three colors, and then I pulled a neutral using the same kind of warmth underneath the color palette. So this palette works together by itself. And then I wanted to go and add some more of these outlying colors that I probably don't want this bright pink to overtake my collection in any way. So if I use it, I'm going to use it sparingly in my collection, and probably never as like a full background with a small motif on it where it would overpower my collection. And I'm not going to get too much into selecting colors from photos right now, but some things I want you to be aware of when you are selecting colors with photos. And let me bring back my tools. In case you don't know, in Illustrator, if you hit tab, it will hide all of your tools and you can just see the view of your artboards. And then you can hit tab to bring your tools back. When you start creating a palette, of course, you can start from a photo. And the way that I usually start is just grab my eyedropper tool. And, you can start clicking around and picking colors just randomly from the photo. But what happens when we do that because we could say like, oh, I love this patio, and oh, there's a yellow chair back there, and oh, there's a yellow tablecloth back here. Let me zoom in more and see if I can get better yellow. It's not quite exactly, but this is what actually happens with in real life with people. And I'm gonna use a green, and oh, the patio's here. I'm gonna use a gray, and I need white. Oops, I need white, so I'm gonna use this color from the chair. And oh, there's a pot back here that's terracotta. I like the pot. And then you kind of end up with this weird color palette that, I mean, this one kind of works. It could work if I push it more, but people just will kind of stop there. And you should always take time to refine your palette and understand what parts are working and what parts aren't working. A better way to approach it is being very observational. Like this is a snapshot I was taking of a rose because I like the color of the rose and what's happening here. But what happens is a lot of people will see something that they love and they'll start pulling from the picture, and they kind of use these things that aren't related to the color palette and of what you're actually trying to observe here, which is this, where there's tons of subtle nuances that you can create a like analogous, beautiful color palette from this. But then they start bringing in other elements that kind of don't relate. So just be wary of that when you're creating color palettes from photos. And then also another thing is like this, for example, these are my friends who we're going to do a little exploration with them in color camp of she's going to show you how they create natural dyes in Oaxaca. And this is my friend Marce, and this is her mother Maria, the Soso family, and they're so fun and lovely to be with. And they're going to show us how they create dyes from, you can see here on the brown, this is their little metate where they grind the cochinilla that create the red colors. But they're going to do a little special for us in color camp. But anyways, this picture is what another thing people will do are kind of pull up a picture like this where there's all these random colors in the background, kind of random colors in here. And you just like the moment, like, oh, it was such a colorful day. I had so much fun. And then, or it could be just like a picnic with your family. That's one I actually see often that people do. And you can say, oh, it's such a colorful day. I had so much fun. And then you kind of randomly start, oh, I like this color. And then, oops, I like this red. And I like this red, this pink. And then I like this yellow. Oh, I like the pink here. Oh, I'm going to introduce a neutral. I'm going to use some skin tone. And anyways, blah, blah, blah. You keep going. And what happens is, first, please don't use skin tones to create your color palette. Those usually aren't a part of the story that you're trying to tell. So as much as you love the kids and you want to include them in your inspiration, that can get kind of weird. So just don't rely on that as a method. Sometimes it's necessary to reference that in terms of part of the story. So don't do that. And then when you're choosing your color palettes here, let me see if I can find a better example here. Be careful of having too many of similar colors. Like these three colors are different, yes, but they can all kind of do the same thing in a design. I can eliminate any two of these and we kind of still have the same palette. So now it's choosing which one of those that you want to keep because you don't need all three of these. In some cases, you do if we go back and look and we want something that's tone on tone, but you can see that these are too close, that we would want to make one of these probably in here a little bit darker. And then actually have it count as a color where, now it's necessary because we have a darker tone. But you don't want to keep tones that are too similar to each other. So just be really careful of that when you're choosing images colors from photos. I see this happen all the time. But something to be aware of is when you are out observing, find beautiful relationships and take pictures of that as a composition by itself. You know, that's a really good way to build your eye for color, is to get out and explore, whether it's in your garden, at a park, on a hike, just wherever you happen to be. It could be at the kitchen table, and explore color and find relationships that are appealing to you and start to understand why. For me, I like the relationship of this purple with this pink and this bright blue. I love bright colors. And so I'm observing that relationship. Well, then what happens when it's supported with kind of a darker, more drab green? That looks like it could be interesting. So I would start with this point as a point of exploration. So let me see. I'm going to stop right now and see if anybody has any questions about anything. If you have a question, put your little hand icon up down at the reactions. It might be set up if you raise your hand too, it might work. Anybody? Any questions? Oh, Michelle, I see you.
Are you able to hear me now?
Michelle, how are you?
Good. How are you? So I have a question. So I tend to take lots of photos of doors and walls and things that architectural and colors that I like. And then what ends up happening is, you go to pull color from that. And because of the lighting, especially I'm working on a lot of I'm focusing really on music related designs because of the lighting, especially because if you're looking at a stage, you get lots of artificial lighting to where, I'm sure you've seen like a white shirt and you put somebody on stage and 1 minute it's orange and 1 minute it's blue.
Mhm.
So if you've had a photo that you liked and you're trying to draw from that, but you get back home and it's a little more drab than you were expected, would you try from memory to sort of pick those colors out and then just punch them up? Do you know what I'm asking?
Yes,
Just
absolutely.
keep playing with them until it kind of matches your memory. Do you know
Yes.
what I mean? Like, would that still be a good starting point, even though it doesn't look when you get home exactly the way it was in your mind? I
Yes.
guess is what I'm asking.
Yes.
Okay.
You touch on a lot of points actually. So
I have a million questions. I tried to zero it down into one.
well, let's see if this overlaps some of those. So when you're taking a picture of something as color reference, you know, first of all, the phone or cameras can't color capture the full spectrum of color that our eye can.
Hmm.
And so this brings me then to when you do capture a photo, you'll see that your file's an RGB file. And that's because RGB has a larger spectrum of color than CMYK. And we're going to talk all about tomorrow in tomorrow's
Okay.
workshop. But when you convert your artwork to CMYK, it loses more color as well. It loses a lot of vibrancy. And so when I'm referencing color, I usually don't get in there with the color picker myself. And
Okay.
it's a really good place for a lot of people to start. But I usually do what you're saying and I work from my memory more. I work
Okay.
from the point of inspiration, like when I was showing that photo of the door and I wasn't exactly literal with picking that color, but that was
Yes.
the point of inspiration. That's how I saw the color in my mind.
Okay. That makes sense.
When I have like a tangerine here, I can pick the color from my memory. I can take a photo of it and I can
Hmm.
use the eyedropper in Adobe Illustrator. I can pull out my Pantone book, and match it to the exact orange that it is.
Right.
And I have all those different ways of sampling this color.
Okay.
But the other thing is when you take a photo of something, you'll see this especially in flowers, that when you take a photo of a flower and you're looking at it under especially in sunlight, that the flower will like fluoresce in the sunlight. And when you
Mhm.
try to take a picture of it, the color won't be as vibrant.
Right.
You'll see that it's because the camera can't capture what our eye can capture. So you're constantly kind of having drop in information. And so in terms of color, and so that's why it's important to be able to build the color confidence and say, this is what I remember. This is how I felt the color was at the time. And then making adjustments from there. Like, what do I need to do to tweak this color to make it work together as a palette? You know, when I'm building a collection, I might start out with a hero print with specific colors, and I have my palette all, you know, oh, this is perfect palette. And then I start working with it in my blenders, and something feels off in the blender. And I might
Hmm.
have to adjust the color palette in the blender to make it work. And it's sometimes slight. It might be a 5 to 10% adjustment in there, either in tint or shade or hue to make it work. But then that means I need to go back and adjust it in my hero print. And there's always a little bit of going back and forth and adjusting your palette.
Okay.
Um, what was the other thing that you made me think about?
I think that maybe the lighting,
Oh, the
the
lighting. So
the
yeah, so
lighting,
the
because that's,
lighting.
that's a big
This
thing.
is another thing is that whenever you're looking at color, like if I'm going to do a professional project and I'm looking at my Pantone color book, I need to be outside in open daylight, not direct sunlight, and or underneath a daylight balance bulb, because that's how I'm seeing the most true color. And when
Right.
I go to a high-end printer, they're going to have a color box likely that has daylight balance and it's all white around so you can put your Pantone color and really see the true color. And when they pull it off the press, they're going to bring it underneath that light as well, and they're going to compare it to the Pantone color book and say, do we have an exact match? How does it look on the paper? How's the density of the ink? All of these subtleties. But lighting and the way you look at color, it can really change the way you perceive color. So if you're taking a picture of something like a door or a piece of architecture, and this is a little study we're going to do in color camp, is with some color swatches, is you're going to understand how you're going to take pictures actually and do this as a swatch project, but you're going to understand how morning light and afternoon light can totally affect the way that you see color.
Hmm.
Can shift it from being more blue in the morning, or in a certain part in the morning it gets a little bit more yellow and bright, and in the afternoon it gets very golden. And so looking at the same surface, because I do the same thing you do, I take tons of architectural photos when I'm traveling, and I'll go back to certain places. Like sometimes I'll see a photo, a door or something, and I'll say, oh man, there's a weird shadow on it. I'll come back later, like in the morning, because I know the sun's coming from this direction.
Right.
Then I come and it's really beautiful. And then I'll pass the door later and say, oh, wow, it's at twilight. This looks really awesome. I'm going to take a picture now. And I actually have several photos of the same door at different times of the day.
Times a day.
Just doing that, understanding more about how color and what's happening when the color shifts during that time of day, because it comes in really helpful for photography, but also just understanding what's happening when you see color in general, you know, in your day to day and what your observations.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, this is exactly why I'm pale, but there's a weird light over here right now. So I look like a ghost. That's why. So that totally makes sense to me. Thank you. I
You
appreciate
look
that.
great. You're fine. All right. Anybody else have any questions before we move on? No hands up. All right. Let's move on here. Oh, wait. I saw this hand. Charisse, I see you.
Hi, thank you so much for taking my question. How many colors do you generally use in a collection?
In a collection, I generally use between 8 to 12. And um, like if you take immersion with Bonnie, she'll teach you 18, and that's because her printer has a color limit of 18, which is very generous limit. So having that is a lot of colors. Now, that doesn't mean you should use the full 18. A problem that I see often is, let's say, especially with people who are working with watercolors, let's say you make a watercolor of a rose. Well, that rose is now made of, let's say, 7 shades of pink.
Mhm.
Because, and maybe you make like, let's say you make kind of like a yellow orange rose, like the one that I showed you, and it's watercolor. Now it's kind of like 11 shades of yellow, orange, and colors in between, right? And so when you vectorize it and bring it into Illustrator, you now have like these 11 random kind of yellows and oranges. And then what I see happen is people will start to use every single one of those colors to make like important in the collection. So they'll use it as a broad background all of a sudden. And that's where I was saying, when you have fewer colors, when I had those similar kind of wine colors that were chosen, and you reduce those down, it creates more harmony in your collection. So sometimes you need that range of colors. Let's say when you're doing watercolor, you need that range of colors because you need that information to describe it the way that you visually want it to look stylistically. However, if you pull away and kind of look at your rows, and this kind of goes back to the last question, is you kind of have a takeaway of color. You have a kind of like a yellow that it looks like, you know, from far away. So it's really picking like which yellow or orange is really popping out to you from all of those colors. You know, I don't need to use every one of those colors in my collection, but I want to use one of those to zone in on. And that's going to be kind of my main color, like my key color that I'm going to use for my collection. And those other ones might only be used to describe, you know, the extra tonalities that you need in watercolor. But try to limit yourself to 8 to 12 colors because that's always going to help your collection be more cohesive. And one thing you should always ask yourself when you're creating your collection, especially when you do your first colorway pass, is there a color in here that can be eliminated because another color can do the same it's doing? So do you have two darks? Like you have a black and a dark, dark brown. Can that black be eliminated because that dark, dark brown has a little bit more uniqueness and it can still, because it has so much contrast, it can still do the same job the black's doing in the collection? And making those subtle eliminations of color will help you have more harmony overall between all of your patterns in your collection. Does
So
that help?
yes, thank you. When you reduce a color by percentage, does that then count as another color?
Well, when I don't mean reduce it by percentage, I mean reduce it by eliminating a color. But yes, when you do, well, no. I'm sorry, I understand your question now. When you reduce color, this is a technical question, so let me answer it the best I can. When I talk about tints generally, a tint is by adding white when you mix in painting to a color. So let's say I have a red and I want to make pink. That's kind of like a tint of red, right? In the world of printing, a tint would be a percentage of that color. So so if we start out with 100% red and we eliminate 50% of it, and we say we want it to be 50% red, it will have the illusion of it being pink because now it's going to be made of tiny little dots.
Mhm.
But it's the same color printing because you're printing one color on the press, but because of the illusion of little dots, you know, it's like the pointillist painters. And they would paint with little dots. So now when it's far away, it looks like it's pink. So that's a good way, you know, I teach people when you have limited color, how to get more color out of a palette by adding a tint to it in that way. But that's a different kind of tint. So to answer your question, I would say that if you're using, let's say you have a spot color selected in Adobe Illustrator, if you use that slider at the top that makes a tint, it's going to print as the same color, but it's going to print as a dot of that color. So that's how it will appear to be a tint, appear to be lighter. Okay,
Thank you.
you're welcome. All right, Janet. Hey, Janet.
Hi. Hi. So I was curious about blending modes. Like, do you strictly just kind of create your color palette and you have like highlight colors and shaded colors, or do you ever rely on like blending modes to kind of create that where it's like essentially the same color, but you know, you use multiply or something like that, and now it has a darker shade?
Yeah, absolutely. So I love blending modes, and they're really handy for several things, and especially when you're working quick. I will usually use multiply is probably one of my favorites, overlay, and what's the other one that I use all the time? It's the opposite of multiply. I can't remember. Um, but yeah, so blending modes, the thing about those are in Illustrator, those are effects. So it's kind of a live effect. So when you put a blending mode on, what it does is it's creating an interaction of color between two shapes. So that color where it's overlapping and it's creating the interaction of color, the multiply effect, let's say, isn't a true color in the way that Illustrator reads colors. It's a true color in the way we see it as pixels, the way it's being represented to us on a screen. So if you export that as a Photoshop file, it will look exactly like it's supposed to be, but you're printing it as a pixel. You're not printing it as a vector. You can also print it as a vector and have it look the same, depending on, how you print it and if you're kind of handling it yourself. But if you're kind of wanting to take that now and you're going to sell it to a fabric licensing company and they need to have all the colors separated, that blending mode isn't going to hold up when it translates.
Gotcha.
So
Okay.
what you have to do is work with a tint or tone or shade. There's a little trick I used to teach in Illustrator, but I tried it the other day and it didn't work the same anymore. And I think they changed something. So my little trick didn't work. But what you kind of have to do is you have to approximate that color by creating a swatch wherever the overlap is and kind of approximate that color. And then you have to expand your artwork and recolor that area using that new color. And that's going to count as an extra color in your palette. But I would avoid working with blending modes if you can as a practice, unless it's something that you're going to print out kind of as pixels, as flat art, because it can create complications if you're trying to separate it and make it look the way that you want to, and you're not using four color process.
That makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. All right, any more questions before we go? Move on. Okay. I don't see any hands, last chance. All right, here we go. So what we're going to do now is work on a color story. And when you write your story, I want you to use adjectives and not color. I don't want you to use color words. I don't want you to say the ocean was blue. I want you to describe the ocean in other ways without using color. And when you start to create your color palettes, I want you to make sure that your colors resonate with your words. If you're describing something that it's a gloomy day at the beach, then your color palette should feel more gloomy. If it's a bright, sunny day at the beach, your color palette should feel more bright. It's really as simple as that. Now, I don't think this isn't in order. Sorry, I have to slide over here. So when we look at colors, colors change meaning for everybody. There's so many different contexts. There's cultural context. There's context of what we're talking about, what we're showing at the time. There's so many different influences, emotional context that you can have in color. So these are just some of them to think about when you're creating color palettes. But pink, can feel romantic and feminine, affectionate, calming, innocent. Red, passionate, powerful, provocative, intense, fear. Orange, enthusiastic, friendly, adventurous, sociable, ambitious. Yellow, joyful, happy, radiant, playful, sunny. Green, fresh, organic, harmonious, abundant, calming. Blue, loyal, tranquil, serene, soothing, stable. Violet, royal, spiritual, mysterious, imaginative, enigmatic. Black, luxurious, elegant, mysterious, dramatic, timeless. White, pure, innocent, harmonious, serene, illuminating. Gray, neutral, balanced, practical, reserved, efficient, stable. So color can have all kinds of different meanings. You can see there's more on each list, and that isn't limited to any of these lists, any of those feelings you can associate. So when you're looking at your color palette overall, you want to think about the what and the why. What are you trying to create? What is the point of inspiration? What is the mood of your, what is the point of inspiration? What story are you trying to tell? What are you trying to convey? Then you want to think about the mood. What is the mood? Like I said, is it a sunny day at the beach? Is it a gloomy day at the beach? Or are you trying to provoke something more deep and more emotional? And are you trying to make a statement? What statement are you trying to make with your art? Is it poppy and loud? Are you trying to be reserved and poetic? You know, what type of statement are you trying to make? So you always want to start with a what and the why. And then the who. Who's the main subject? Who's the secondary subject? And who are the supporting characters? Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that you have to have a person or a pet character or something in your story. You know, the main subject can be a tangerine. And the secondary subjects could be the leaves and other things growing in the orchard. What are the supporting characters? Is there apples in the orchard? Is there a basket that's used to harvest the tangerines? Is there a fence around the orchard? Are there birds singing on the fence in the orchard? So who are the supporting characters? And then that brings you how you start to build a collection. You start to bring all those little things together and go back to what's the hero print? It started out as just a tangerine, but now is it a tangerine with a branch and one of the birds that's sitting on the fence in the tangerine hero print? So these stories start to connect through all of my patterns in my collection. And then you want to just think about the where. So think about what's the sense of place? Where are you? What is this moment? Describe your environment and think about a 360 view. Think about what's all around you, what's below you, what's above you, what's to the side, what's behind you. Thinking about all these things to really help you expand your collections and your color story and your story in general. And then think about the when. Is this a specific moment? Is it a season? Is this summer? Is this spring? Is it a certain day? Is it 4th of July in summer? Think about the time of day. Is it morning? Is it evening? That brings us back to what we were talking about from the question about lighting and why it's important to understand what color looks like under certain light. Is it morning? How does that shift the mood of your colors? Is it evening? How does that shift the mood of your colors? And then think about, is it during a period of time? Does it take us back further in history? You know, that's another way to think about the win. Is this a heritage piece that comes from a certain time? Is it coming from the future and you can be totally irreverent with your color? And then think about which objects support your story? What other little things can you bring in? These start to be stories, parts of your story that could be in your Blender print, for example, these little objects. And then how do they relate to your greater color story? How do they bring in little accents of color? And then think about different perspectives and think about your shape language and your texture. If you want to have, something be poppy and fun, how does that work with the color palette you're choosing? If you're using poppy fun shapes and you're using maybe a muted color palette. So think about how all of those relate to the story that you're trying to tell with color. All right, so we're going to just do a quick review of color theory, but it's going to be a very quick overview, just so we are all on the same page. So here we have our color palette, and we have our primary colors, red, yellow, and blue, our secondary colors, orange, green, and purple, and then our tertiary colors, which are a mix between our primary and secondary colors, like red, orange. And if you have a tertiary color, it's always named with the primary color first. So it's red, orange, yellow, orange, for example. So in our color wheel, we have color harmonies. So we have complementary, which are like red and green across from each other. We have split complementary, which would be red, and then next to it, the colors next to it, which are yellow, green, and blue, green, because we're splitting the complementary. And then we have triadic, which would be like red, blue, and yellow. So you can imagine spinning, if there was a little dot here, spinning any of these triangles or arrows around, and wherever it would point, it would reflect the opposite color, let's say for complementary. And then here we have analogous, which are three colors next to each other on the color wheel. So here we have red, violet, red, and red, orange. And if I eliminated these tertiary colors, I could still have an analogous palette of violet, red, and orange like you see down here. So hue is, we're talking about pure color. That's our pure color. Tint, we're talking about adding white to that color. You can see here, these are all lighter versions of tint. And shade, we're adding black to that color. Now, those are really easy to do when you're creating a color palette in Illustrator. Is what I usually do is I start with my color. So let's say I'm going to start with this purple as my main color. And I want to create a tone on tone print. So I want to have a color that's really close to it, but a little bit darker or a little bit lighter. What I'm going to do is I'm going to double click on this color swatch here on the fill, and I'm not going to slide this slider at all to change my color. What I'm going to do is I'm going to circle around, and I'm going to go up a little bit lighter. And you can see here is the color that I'm picking right now, and this is the color before. So you can see it's a little bit lighter, and that's enough tonal difference for me to have a pattern, like kind of a tone on tone, maybe a texture in the background of my pattern. So that would be a really good way to choose it. Then I just click OK, and now I have that swatch. Let's say I wanted to make it darker. I could drag another swatch from that. I'm just holding Option and then Shift to keep it level to drag the block out. And I would click here, and now I could go darker. And now I have a harmonious shade, my regular, well, it's not really a hue because it's not pure color, but my regular color, and then my tint. Another important thing to understand is value. Value, when we talk about value in terms of color, is understanding how color converts when it converts to black and white, to grayscale. So here we have our three primary colors. And when we convert this to black, this to gray, or sorry, not to black, but to gray, this to gray, and this to gray, we can all see that these colors land at different points on the value scale. This is what the translation of this color is when you turn it to grayscale. So understanding value is going to help you understand how to use contrast in your collections when you even understand how contrast between color works when you think about colors in terms of black and white. So value is one of the most important things that you can understand when you're creating harmony between your collections. So when we were talking about tint earlier, and I was saying that you have a color, you can see here that if we have black, and this is what it looks like when we see this as gray on screen, when we print this out as a halftone and this is magnified, you would see that we would see 60% black as a bunch of large dots. You can see the dots get smaller at 40% and smaller at 20% and smaller at 10%. And at each time we're decreasing the size of the dot, we're increasing the white space. So as we zoom out, it starts to appear gray to our eye. You can see how these appear gray when we look at them very small. But in fact, it's a series of dots, and that's what we see when we print. So what we're going to do now is we're all going to do a color story together. So first thing, I want you to think about the what and the why, and I want everybody to put something in the chat, and I'm just going to pick random things, and we're going to start building a random story together. And we're not going to build a collection, of course, but we're going to build a palette based upon our words. So first, I want everybody to put something in for the what and the why, and that means putting a short sentence like, a sunny day at the beach, just kind of a short overview of putting us in the place and kind of what the mood is at the moment. Oh, I love that. Moonlit forest at night. All right, any more options? Outdoor breakfast. Oh, that's fun. Oh, I never would have thought of that. A tree stump with a mushroom in the daytime. That's fun. Summer walk through the grove. A prescribed fire in a longleaf pine forest. A day at Disney World. That's fun. Well, we can't use Disney. Well, we can use Mickey Mouse now because of the copyright law. I'm sure you guys have all heard about that, that you can now use the old Mickey Mouse. Cozy reading by the fire on a stormy day. Waves crashing against the lighthouse. That's really cool. Early morning fog and mist. Halloween night. A walk along a wooded bougainvillea at sunset. Meadow of flowers in the morning. Exciting premiere of Sun's trumpet composition. Tropical flowers in the morning. Twilight in the garden. Clear winter morning. Crisp winter light. You guys are doing really good at this. Windy forest in a storm. Italian seaside walk. Oh, that sounds romantic. Hot summer day in a bright garden. Lake view. Driving along the Amalfi Coast in Italian summer. Wow. I want to go. Hot day hiking in the mountains. Dress for lunch in Portofino. Everybody is talking about Italy. Cracking cold and crisp winter light. Skiing on snowy winter trails. I skipped one. Sun reflection on pennies in the water on a fountain in a cool summer day. That sounds cool. That sounds like it could be a really pretty palette. Walk by the pond with frogs, peeping at twilight, bird watching in a salt marsh, snowy morning in a deep forest, afternoon walk in an arboretum. Wow, excellent ideas. All right, so I'm going to pick one that will be kind of broad for us to come up with ideas more easily. Let's say, I'm going to pick this one, a meadow of flowers in the morning. So that's kind of our what and why. And it already gives us a sense of time, and that already starts to give you a mood. You know, what kind of morning is it? Is it a foggy morning? Is it a crisp morning? There's all these different ways of thinking about that. So what is in the meadow now? These brings us to the who. What are our characters? Like, what types of flowers are in the meadow? You can all have different ones. It can be those little, what are those little those little like bluebells, and they are like little bell flowers that fall over. Trina says sunflowers, daisies. So what does your meadow look like? Wildflowers. I'm going to say wildflowers for mine, and now I'm going to start thinking about what the wildflowers are in my area. So they're like poppies and lupines. Am I aware as a meadow? Is it a mountain meadow? Is it a desert meadow? Is it a country meadow? I'm going to say a mountain meadow. When you think about our when, we said in the morning. Is it, retro? Is it in the 70s? Are we doing this through retro vibes? Is it a future meadow? Is it desolate? Is it a meadow that we save? What's that story? And then which? What are our supporting characters? Are there butterflies? Are there bees? Are there snakes in your meadow? Are there deer in your meadow? I'm in the mountains, so there's deer in my meadow. So now I need to kind of think about, I'm going to do this as a collection or an illustration. And what are the most important characters? Maybe if I decide, oh, I want to put a hero print and bring my deer into the meadow with my poppies and my lupines, and now I'm bringing all my colors into the hero print. So I'm bringing that whole story together. And that's a great way to bring your collection together, is to ground all of the colors in the hero print. And then you can kind of have fewer colors in your supporting prints, and your blender print have fewer colors in that part of the collection. And then everything starts to relate. So once you get your story down, now it's time to pick colors. So what I want you to do is open your Illustrator file. And you can always go back. I'm going to have the replay play for you guys for a few days, so you can go back and do this later too. And you're going to open your worksheet file. And just so I can show you a couple of things about Illustrator really quick, what you can do is take your selection tool, which is the black arrow, and you can highlight over everything here, and you can delete that. And then what you can do is, see how this frame is darker? That means I'm on that artboard as my active artboard. I want to go to this artboard. See how that frame got darker? Now I'm on this active artboard. What I want to do is select everything on the active artboard and press Command C to copy. And then what I'm going to do is click onto this artboard again. You can see that's active now. And I press Command F, which is paste in front, but it's going to paste it exactly in place where it is on this page. So now I have a duplicate of this document on 2 pages. So what we're going to do is, I'm going to go through this kind of quickly, but we're going to start with our first color. So this is going to be kind of the hero color of my print. And let's say I'm going to change my collection and call it Poppy Meadow in the morning. And it's going to be all about poppies. So I'm going to start with an orange poppy color, as will be like the flowers in my meadow. And this is going to be the main color of my collection. Now I'm going to say, well, what time of year is it? Is it spring in the meadow? Is it a drab winter? Is it fall? Is it changing color? Well, mine's going to be spring. And I'm just going to use my color tool up here. And I'm going to start adjusting color. So you can see that it starts out in a neutral gray in the center. And I'm working in RGB mode. That's the way your file's set up, because it gives us the most color flexibility. So I'm going to start sliding this and kind of finding a poppy green. So when I'm sliding this, what I'm doing is, if we pull all of these down to the edge to 0, you could see it's black, because RGB is showing us color. If I turn this up, all the red lights are on. If I turn this up here, all the green lights are on. and I turn this here, all the blue lights are on my screen. Well, what you're doing is you're mixing color by using light by adjusting these. So if I want a green color, I could start here at 0. I can move this all the way up to green. If I want to add blue to my green, I can adjust it here. If I want to neutralize my green, I could start to add a little bit of red. If I think it feels too bright, I can slide my green back down and make it less green. So what you're doing is you're adjusting the amount of blue, green, and red in your color. Another way you can pick color is to double click this and adjust here where you are on this color spectrum. So I could be in my reds, my pinks, my purples, my blues, my light blues, my kind of turquoise, green, yellow, orange, and back to red. So I can be in any one of these parts of my hue. And then here with this color, I can now pick, is it pure hue? Is that 100% of what I'm seeing here in my scale as I adjust the hue? Or is it lighter? Am I adding white to it? Or is it darker? Am I adding black to it? Or is it a tone? Am I adding gray to it? So you add white by sliding to the left, black by sliding down, and gray by sliding diagonal. And then you could adjust anywhere in this zone to find the exact tint, tone, or shade that you want of this hue. So let's say you like this. Let me find the color I actually like. I like the color that I was at. So let's say I like this color that I was at, and I decide I want to keep that. And now I want to make a color that I could use in my collection just as a tone on tone for texture, and I want it to be darker. Well, I'm going to have that be not really an important color in my collection. So I'm going to put it down here with one of the less important colors. If you select this and they both select like I just did here, I'm sorry, I forgot to ungroup them in the file. So you press Shift Command G to ungroup, and you'll only be able to select one. So what I would do here is I would start here, and I would use my eyedropper tool and select this color, and I would double click here, and I would say, okay, I want it to be a texture that's a little bit darker on that background color. So I'm going to go a little bit darker, and that's how I'm going to add a kind of not significant color to my collection. Then I'm going to go here and think about what other colors in my story. Oh, there's a deer in my story. So I'm going to double click here and I'm going to find a brown. So I'm going to go down to the orange area and go over here. And actually, you know what? I'm going to even start with this orange. So I have the same, oops. Let me cancel here. I'm going to go here and use my eyedropper tool. And I'm going to double click here. And I'm going to start with this orange so I have the same undertone in my brown as that exact orange. Let's say I'm going to have a little light color deer like that. So now I have my deer, I have some green foliage, and I have my main kind of hero icon will be the poppy in the collection. Then I have some other characters. I wrote lupines. So I'm going to go here and double click here, and I want some kind of purplish blue. So I'm going to slide up to the blue and kind of where it starts to transition to purple. Be a little bit more blue. And I'm going to go here. I'm going to slide down so it's a little bit more blue, kind of like that. Kind of a bluish purple. And I want it grayed out a little bit more, a little lighter. And as I adjust it here, I'm looking at it here, but I'm looking at how does it look with all these colors in my collection as well. All right. So now let's say I wanted to have a little lighter detail of this purple color. I would select another box down here and select the same color in the box, double click here, and go here and just make it a little bit lighter. And then let's say I wanted to add a neutral to this collection. I would probably start by going to my orange and using that I would double click here and I would bring it way over to the white and maybe down a little bit to the gray. And you could see that now my neutral is going to have a nice warm undertone and the same tone as my orange. And you could see how harmonious that is. What happens a lot of the time is people will introduce a neutral and they'll just kind of go here to the color palette and they'll just find kind of like, oh, I'm going to pick a light color. And then you end up with kind of this weird yellow color that doesn't feel harmonious with your collection. So what I want to do now is add a couple more colors. And I'm just going to add a darker purple for now. I don't need to be so specific since I don't really have a collection to go with this. Maybe more grayed out like that. And then I probably need something with a little bit more contrast. So, or maybe I want another accent color. So I'm going to start with this purple. And what I'm going to do is now take it to the blue world more. And that feels too similar still. You can see I'm slowly sliding it and it's getting more green. I'm bringing it down to the light blues. I'm going to go back up here. And this right here feels different enough, but it still has a nice value relationship. These are still very similar, so they can work well together. But it has enough contrast. I might make it a little bit lighter that it can work with these darker colors, these in-between colors as well. And this lighter color has enough contrast that it can work on top of that as well. So that's how I start to kind of think about color when I'm developing a color story and develop a color palette. Next, what I would want to do is I'm just going to select this colorway and I'm going to hold Option and drag it over. Actually, let me do it this way. I'm going to delete this first. And I'm just going to drag this over. And now what I'm going to do is we've thought about this as our morning field or our spring field. What happens when we think about this as evening or summer? You know, how does that change the color, the way we think about it? Do the flowers get more golden in the evening and a little bit darker? What happens to this green foliage? Does it get a little bit darker in the evening? And maybe a little bit more golden? That happens to the deer as it's, you know, like it's backlit by the horizon, the brown gets darker. And this is a way you can start to think about time and time of day, time of year, season, in terms of it being an opposite and how it relates to you building a color palette or making a shift change in your collection when it comes to creating color. You can see I'm kind of applying the same principles. I'm making all the colors a little bit darker and kind of adding a little bit more yellow into them. And I can see here that this has more gold, and that's why I know I'm adding yellow into it, because I'm taking out the blue from it. And that's one way to think about changing your colors when you want to make a shift in your patterns. You know, what changes about that light at that time of day? And then there you can see that instantly I have a different vibe, but a color harmony that still works. You know, this plays a much more kind of brighter role, so it might have to be pulled back a little bit more, or maybe greened up a little bit. But you can see that by switching the way you think about it, can change really quick. So what I would like you to do now is, for those of you who want to stay on, if you have to go now, I understand. We will meet again tomorrow at noon to talk about RGB, CMYK, and Pantone a little bit more. And as I said, Color Camp is open. If you want to enroll and you're on the fence about it, I'm going to give you a special coupon right now. And the word is one word, Color Story. And that will save you $100 if you enroll today. It's only good for today. And there's only 5 of those coupons. So it's first 5 who get it. Get it. And now what we're going to do is I want you to pull off with a group. And I want you to create a quick color story in your group. And what you're going to do is we're going to go into breakout rooms. And you're going to create a color box at the top and of your main color. Okay. And you're going to write down the hex code for that color. So let me show you what I'm talking about here. You're going to go and you're going to create whatever color is your hero color right now, whatever color that might be. And then when you go into the group, you're going to share this number right here where the hashtag is. 3D67EA would be my number. So when someone shares their hashtag with you, you're going to fill in one of the boxes here. Your job then is to take each other colors, because you're all starting with the same color and you're all sharing colors with each other. Your job then is, let's say somebody gives me this color. My job is to go into here and tweak my color, starting with that original color and making it so that it works with my blue or the palette that I envision. So I want you now to go in with each other. I'm going to put you in breakout rooms and you're going to have 30 minutes in the breakout room, and then we'll come back after and you can share your color palettes. If you don't have enough, depending on the amount of people, of course you can add tints, tones, and shades. All right, so I'm going to stop right now. I'm going to put you in a breakout room. Oh, people are bailing. We're going to have small rooms. All right, we're going to put you in 3 rooms. Let's see. I'm going to put you in 2 rooms, actually. All right, you're going to see a little thing and you just say join room.
Okay, so
Hello.
so do we?
Hello.
Oh, hi,
Hello.
Chico.
How's everybody?
Good.
I think
So
we're both.
we put
Do we-
all 5 colors in one colorway, and now we're trying to make them agree with each other. Is that the plan?
Yes. Can you share your colors with me really quick? One person?
Sure, I'll go ahead and go. So B as in boy, 75800,
Okay.
006, A as in apple, B as in boy, 0.
006, A and apple, B as in boy, 0.
384, D as in dog, 7, B as in boy. And then 8, E as in elephant, 4, E as in elephant, C as in cat, 6.
Okay.
F as in Frank, 1, 5, A as in apple, 2, 9.
Oh, cool. All right. So you guys are all clear on that you're supposed to kind of just based upon your original color, make everybody else's color agree with your palette, the way that you just want it to read. All right?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll see you guys soon.
And can I just ask, sorry, do
Yeah.
we want to have the because there's only 5 of us, do we want to make the full colorway, so add in the extra 4 colors at the bottom?
Sure, you can. You can add maybe some tints or tones. I mean, some tints, yeah, tints, tones, or shades to that.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah,
Thank you.
that would be great. I'll see you soon.
Thanks.
Third color. Haha, Chico came back. Help.
Hey, everybody. I'm checking in on you.
Hi.
Okay.
There were some tech issues when we started, so we're a little.
Yeah.
Oh my God, that's too funny.
I'm waiting for Illustrator to come back to life for me.
Oh no.
It crashed right when you gave us the assignment. So I'm like, oh, my
I'm
poor
sorry.
geriatric computer, but it may come before the end of our little session. So if
We
it
only
does,
got
it's
2
good.
colors on our
I would,
list.
if you just make sure that you include, I mean, that you quit any extra, like if you have Photoshop or anything else open.
Yeah, nothing else is
No?
open.
Hmm.
No, it's my computer. It does this, and it's just always, it's a sad story.
Yes, I know. That's
Well, fingers
sad
crossed.
story.
Fingers crossed.
It looks like it might come back. So if it does, I'll be set to go. In the meantime, I'm writing down everybody else's numbers.
Okay, excellent. Yeah, because you can work on it later, and I'll send a
Yeah.
replay for you
Yeah.
after.
Yeah, thank
So.
you. Thank you. I'm
Okay, then
sorry,
we-
guys.
Okay.
It's all right. We still
You
need a
don't have-
color from Hannah and Charisse.
Okay, I'm just copying my number into the chat.
Okay.
Can you read your number to me, Hannah? I mean,
Okay,
sorry,
it's
Cherie. Who was just saying
it's-
Cherie? Sorry.
Hannah's
It's-
talking.
okay, FFD
Can you-
154.
Can you say, because it's not coming clear, is it like F or D as in David, F as in Fred? Can you re-say that like that?
Okay, F is as in Frank,
Yep.
2 times, and then D as in David, and
Yep.
then 154. I'm just putting it in the chat.
And it's yellow, right?
Yeah,
golden
it's
yellow.
like yellow. I'm thinking goldenrod.
Yeah, it's pretty. Okay, Charisse, do you have a color?
No, that was Charisse. Can we get?
9.
Can you hear
9.
me?
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. Okay, it's 9. D is in David.
Oh wait.
D is in David. A is in Apple. E is in Edward. 4.
9DD E4. I missed
No.
something, I think.
AE, you missed an A.
A.
9DDA.
Okay, I'll say it again. 9 D D A E 4.
Got it.
Okay. Pale blue.
Okay.
Hey, look
Sorry,
at
I
us
mixed
go.
everybody's names up. Okay. How about cat next?
Can you
I
hear
have
me?
the bright green on the top. I have the
Yeah.
first one. I'll tell you the code.
Yeah, tell me the
Again.
code.
It is 2-1, B as in Bob, 2-4.
Wait, can you, I'm sorry, can you say that again slower and like say it after so it's not coming through clear on my end?
Okay. 2, 1, B as in Bob, 2, 4, B as in Bob.
Cool. Green. Nice.
So Chico, since you're here, you know what I'm not getting is, this is Kat speaking. I don't have, you know, you had the sliders, the blended, the red, the green, and the blue. I don't have that on my.
Go
It doesn't
to
come up.
view
View.
and go down to color. Is it some color?
They're all faded out.
Oh, sorry. I'm sorry. Go to window
Window, they're all
and then
faded
go and
out.
make sure color's checked.
Color is checked. And now I'm having a problem like everybody else.
Color should be viewable. Can I
Yeah,
get
it's just-
Terry? Who did I miss? Terry's color?
Yeah, my color is 0099. You like David 0.
Oh, kind of like a blue. Nice. This is like a nice palette.
It is pretty.
Okay, I got Hannah right.
Yeah,
Then Lauren, do you have a color? Or
I don't have my illustrator up all the way yet.
it's okay. And then Marty?
Oh my gosh, it just like deleted my colors.
Oh, we have a Marty on here too? Oh, didn't know. Sorry, Marty.
Marty's
Her
on
phone.
there. She's muted.
It just
Um,
deleted all my
Oh, there are
colors.
all these
okay,
other people.
Charisse, press Command Z. Don't freak out.
I just freaked out. No, I'm doing Command Z and it's actually deleting everything from my window.
It's undoing.
It's
Oh.
undoing.
Can you hear me?
Okay, then press Shift Command Z and redo it. But how did your colors
Can you hear me,
delete?
Chico?
Yes. Oh, Marty, there you are. Okay. Can I get your color?
Yeah, it's E as in electric, 8, the number 8,
Uh-huh.
6013.
Oh, wow. It's almost the same color as
E8013.
E86013.
Thanks, Marty. It's an orange. It's a nice color.
It is.
Yeah.
Okay, y'all.
yeah,
So
love that.
your palette actually looks really good the way it is.
Yeah.
Close,
I
but
didn't.
I would say just select your color and make tweaks to the other colors that other people gave you. And I'll come back around in about, how long is it? 7, 8 minutes.
Before you go, I can't get the horizontal sliders, so I can't tweak in the way you've shown us. Color window is up. Color guide is
No,
something
not
different.
the color guide's something different. So your color window's up. What are you seeing in it?
In color, I have like a aurora borealis of the whole rainbow.
Okay, select the little hamburger menu and see if you select show options.
Yes, I do. Oh, look at that. Very
Yeah.
clever. Thank you so
Okay,
much.
awesome. All right. I'll see you guys in about 8 minutes.
Yeah, thank you.
Mhm.
That's way better.
Okay, are there
So I'm going to work on these two color palettes. These are what the students came up with in their groups. And I'm going to go document setup and edit artboards. And I'm just going to drag this over by holding Option and Shift and make a copy of that. So now I'm working with their exact same colors they started with. And these look pretty good just the way they are together. I think this purple could use some tweaking. And I think we can add some other colors in here. So let's just double click our purple. I think it could be a little bit, have more red in it maybe. No, let's keep it with the blue and make it dark, dark like that. And this I want to have a little bit more blue in it. So I'm going to bring a little bit more color into that. Actually, I think I want to keep it about the same value here, but I want to use this blue. So I'm going to cancel that. I'm going to start with that blue. And I'm going to make it about the same value in there. That. And I'm going to make a dark brown. That. Go in here and bring this down and make a dark brown. I'm going to make a nice pale orange. Maybe a neutral. Not too gray. All right. And let's make us a bright blue to play with here as an accent. And let's make a tone on tone for this that we can use for a texture. So that would give me a really nice balance of color there. And using this is a nice kind of pastel, kind of makes me think of spring and Easter. This orange feels a little bit muted. So I'm going to go in there and kind of pop it up and maybe bring it a little bit more to the yellow color. So we have kind of yellow shared as the underlying color because yellow and blue make green. And then this connects to the yellow really well. And then let's put a darker green in there. Oops, I need to ungroup those. So look here, let's make a darker green for contrast. And let's make another yellow in here. Like a golden yellow. And let's add another pastel. Maybe a pastel orange. Well, let's start with this orange. Lighter version of it. And then maybe those just as complement. Maybe we go here and keep it at the same value and we make it more red. Or make it pink. That pink, kind of bluish pink is nice complement. Let's make it a little bit more grayed out. There we go. We've got a spring palette and a beautiful autumn palette. Kind of summer transitioning to autumn. Looks great. Okay, we're gonna go back and check in on everybody. Hey. I think everybody's winding up still. We should see everybody popping back in here in a few seconds. Here they come. Here comes everybody. All right, so how did everybody fare on the exercise? Was it fun interacting with other people and kind of sharing colors and seeing where you all come from, but how they can all work together in some way and understanding more about when there's little things out of your control and you make those color adjustments, what a difference they can make? I'm going to share mine really quick, what I did. So this was your original palette here on this side. And then here's the palettes that I refined really quick. And my thinking behind them, I talked it through and I recorded it, but I'm not sure if it really, so my thinking behind it was I basically just changed this purple in the beginning and this kind of steely blue so that these blues felt more related to each other. And I made the purple darker so I had a darker complement. And then I also made a darker version of this color and I made a kind of a mid-tone version that I could do a tone on tone with this color. I made a neutral based upon my orange and then a bright pop of blue to pair with these kind of muted blues. And this one I thought more about as a spring colorway, the way it was going already. So I didn't really change much except for the orange. I made it a little bit more yellow because we already have a lot of yellow in these undertones here. So doing that, and then I just added kind of this dark green for an accent, and then added some more pastels and a darker version of the yellow to kind of play, you know, if I wanted to do a tone-on-tone texture or something with that. So that's how I came up with my solutions there. Does anyone else want to share anything they came up with? Raise your hand if you want to share. Nobody? Hannah, was that you raising your hand? Tracy, she's raising her hand. All right,
Hi.
Tracy.
So
Hidden-
this was fun.
Oh yeah? Awesome. I'm glad you enjoyed it.
Yeah.
Um,
So what would you like me to share?
Can you go to share screen at the bottom of your screen
Yeah.
and click that and just show us the color palette that you ended up with?
Let's see. Let's see. Zoom. Oh, let's see. I have to update all the preferences.
Oh no. Sorry.
Oh, yeah, it won't let me. It wants me to quit so that I can share.
Oh, bummer. Anybody else? Any other shares? Okay, Kat. Okay, I'm gonna put you on mute, Tracy.
Yeah.
Oops. Okay, Kat.
Hi, I don't know how to share either, so we
Down at
went
the
into this.
bottom, it should say share screen in the center of the controls at the bottom.
At the bottom of the Zoom?
Yeah,
Oh
the
yeah,
Zoom
so
window.
it does.
Yeah.
Yeah, it
So-
would like to record this, open systems, preferences, design, window, that, yeah, no, it's gonna be you, entire screen, Chrome
Entire
tab,
screen. Yeah.
entire screen,
Or the app. It's up to you.
doesn't give me,
Yeah, it depends on your system and stuff, what options it gives.
okay, no, I can't figure out how to do that. Let me try that again. Share screen, entire screen. It just says oh, I have to pick it, share. Is it shared? Does it look
No.
like you, looking at you?
No.
Oh, okay, okay. Oh, see, we're not all set up to do this.
We're all having the same issue today. It's okay. It's all good.
But I do, since we're talking, I do have a question. So
Okay.
I definitely am. So what I'm looking at is the difference in color between like what our group's color, and I wish I could share it with you. In the chat, does it take JPEGs? If I take a
I don't
screen snap?
know. I don't know that, to be honest.
Anyway, ours was pretty bright
Uh-huh.
color palette, the yellows and the greens and the blues. On my screen, my color palette, which I haven't edited, looks way brighter than the one on yours. So I thought, oh, I must be working in CMKY, but I checked my document and it is RGB. My next question, though, is in the color with the sliders. I see CMKY. I can, even though I'm in RGB, I can adjust the color sliders in CMKY. Why is that?
Okay, let me show you. Oops. Okay.
So our group's colors were way more saturated than what you're showing. So I'm not sure why is that.
Okay, so there's all sorts of things that happen when we're talking about kind of what we're talking about right now is kind of color calibration and how colors look. You know, all of us have a different screen and our screens are calibrated differently. They're made of different materials. You know, you have LCD, LED, you have new technology on how they display screens. And so when you're using all these different ways of displaying screens and where the light source is coming from, it changes the way we see color. So that's where using like Pantone, for example, when you're printing something, comes in to help, because we don't have any control over how you see the color on my screen and I see the color on your screen. You know, like it could be the same file, but we could see it differently. And also here we're talking about, you know, Zoom's taking information and processing it and sending it over the internet, and it's probably not exactly the same way I'm seeing it. So there's all these little breakdowns that are happening. But that kind of is just something to be aware of, is, you know, why we choose Pantone colors, and I'll talk about it more tomorrow, is so that if I'm sending a poster out with this colorway over here on it, I need to make sure that this yellow is exactly how I want it to print. If I'm printing it in Europe and I'm here in the United States, how am I going to make sure this is the exact same color? I can't tell them, oh, the same color you see on screen, because their screen looks different than my screen. So I have to say, it's this Pantone yellow. And that's where looking at the Pantone color in true light, in natural daylight, comes into play. And then when they look at their color swatch book in natural daylight, they're going to be looking at the print when it comes off the press and saying, this is the yellow that he wanted. He wanted this exact color. It matches on press, so we're good to go. And that's how you have true control over color in a professional setting. You know, in like non-professional settings such as, you know, POD sites and that sort of thing, you don't have that sort of control over color. And then you have to have flexibility with yourself and accept that these things aren't going to be exact. And they probably won't be very exact anyways, like when we talk about it technically. But what you're seeing here is when you're checking about your color profile for your file, you can see up here in my tab, it says RGB preview, and that means that I'm working in an RGB file. If I go over here to, and I'll talk more about this stuff tomorrow, but if I go over here to color settings, you can see here that these are all my color settings and everything's set up for, these are like technical settings for printing and color workspaces. So those are my RGB settings. But over here, I also have document color mode. That's where I can change it to a CMYK file or a RGB file. Now, the difference is this. When I'm working with RGB, I have greater spectrum of color. Over here, what you're seeing is the way I'm controlling the color that I'm seeing. So this doesn't have to do with the file color setting. This has to do with the way you're controlling mixing. This is your color mixer. So if I go here, I have the option to change it to CMYK. What it's going to do is it's going to limit my color to a CMYK mixture. And now I'm seeing it. If I translated that hex code to CMYK, this is how it would display.
We're not seeing, are you showing us? Because we just see you.
What? Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Somebody just would have said that sooner.
It's a tech day, bro.
It is a tech day. I am so sorry, y'all. Let me go over that again. Okay. So what was I saying? So I said a lot. So when you're working with your color here, let me change this back. This is where it was, RGB, and you're asking about this color preview here. You can see up here in my tab that it says RGB. This is the color setting for my file. So if I go here under file, you can see document color mode. So my document color mode is set in RGB. This means that I have a greater color spectrum when I'm working in RGB in this file. You can see if I change it to document color mode CMYK, what's going to happen is some of these colors are going to get a little bit more dull. And you see those two colors at the bottom? See how they switch and get more dull when I go back and forth between CMYK and RGB? And that's because CMYK doesn't have as much color spectrum available as RGB. Now, this color window over here is just your mixer. It doesn't control the overall profile of your color in your document. So even if I change this to CMYK, this
Oh,
means I am now changing into a CMYK spectrum
oh,
I'm mixing with. And I can
where did you
also,
change that?
with the little
Okay.
hamburger menu. So you can show
Oh,
options, and you
awesome.
can go to grayscale. So when I talk about value, if I highlight all these colors and I want to understand what the value of these colors is, I can go over here and I can go to, actually, I have to do it separately, but I can go to grayscale
Ah,
for each of these colors. And this lets me understand the value more. So when people have buzzing colors, it's usually because of this. You can see that these two colors are very close in value.
mhm,
So if I design like a thin line with this, I
mhm.
might get some buzzing because
Well, that's
eye,
really interesting.
because my eye can't focus on the difference of the color, the value of the color. So there's different things that are happening simultaneously where we're seeing contrast of color, but we're
Mm,
also seeing contrast of value. And so I'm usually looking to have a couple values similar in my collection, but they especially will buzz when, so you can see that this green here is darker, and you can see this green is a mid-tone or a little bit dark, but the differences are enough that I can use them as a tone on tone
mhm.
because they're different enough in value that they create contrast. But where you really get into having value issues is
Mhm.
if this was more purple, this blue line, and the same value, our eye would buzz more because it's hard for us to focus on kind of the differentiation of the color there. So your eye bounces more and vibrates between these colors. That's not exactly buzzing, but let me get it.
This was really helpful. Thank you for doing that.
Yeah, so that's just kind of another way to think about your colors. So this is your mixer, and there's grayscale, RGB, and CMYK. Those are usually the two that you use the most. HSB is hue, saturation, and brightness. It's another way to think about it. It's more similar to the slide, if you double click, it's more similar to this interface, where here you're using hue, which is this slider here across the top. And then saturation is the amount of saturation, the amount of chroma in the color. And then brightness is adding black to it. So you're taking away, this is fully bright color, and this you're
Mhm.
taking light away. So there's different ways of mixing color, but I would recommend staying between RGB and CMYK. But I always start in RGB, which I'll explain more tomorrow, is because you have a broader spectrum of color to work with. And I can always take color away and convert it to CMYK. But if I start in CMYK and I wanted a brighter color, I can't really go back and add that in so easily. It's harder to go back and add that back in. So I work with a lot of bright colors or neons, and let's say I'm working with a neon color and I'm delivering the concept to a client, or if I'm pitching it and I say, I envision this pattern with a neon ink, you know, Pantone XXX whatever ink, and I tell them I envision it that way, then what happens is I can't match that illusion in CMYK if I start using my work in that. I have to have that extra brightness that RGB gives me to simulate that to show to my client or the company I'm pitching or whatever. All right. Does anyone have any more questions? Charisse.
Yes, thank you. Two things. One is an observation. When you talk about colors that are like too close, the hue is too close, the value is too close. I've noticed in the past, for example, when I'm looking at a man's shirt and it's in stripes and I can't look at them because it affects my eyes so much. Is that, I thought it was because of the stripe and how wide it was or how thin it was. But it's actually what you said, it's actually the value. The values are too close and my eyes are bouncing. Is that correct?
It's a combination of both. So that's very observant of you, as that's something else that you have to think about. It's called quantity of color. And so I can overcome that vibration if I now take one of those colors and I make the stripe wider, because now I have more of that color. So now my eye is not vibrating between tiny little pinstripes. It has more of a broader stripe, so my eye won't bounce as much. So sometimes you'll see, I remember Lavon when she first did this cupcake pattern, and I remember that's how I met her, was through this pattern. She was doing a cupcake collection, but I remember that she had all these pastel colors selected. And this happens a lot with pastels because they're all kind of similar in value. And if they have sometimes too much chroma, too much hue, brightness in them, they can start to bounce. But what happens is she was using them on cupcakes, and then she had little colors for the sprinkles and such. When you start taking out some of those colors and using maybe a little pink pastel color as a bright background, and then you mix it with a little tiny yellow motif, they might vibrate. And so that either means that you have to make an adjustment of color, but you might be able to make an adjustment of scale or of the line weight. Often I'll see kind of line drawings and it will start to look X-ray and it will kind of like make your eyes bounce. And it's because those contrasts aren't right. And so our eyes can't focus on anything. And people get too attached to like, oh, I love these colors, so I'm going to keep the color. I'm not going to change it. But you have to make those adjustments so your eyes can focus on what we're trying to show, which is the pattern or the design. So I would say the adjustments are that you can change it by implementing a thicker stroke or line weight, or making the motif larger sometimes can accommodate for that kind of buzzing situation without changing the color. But sometimes you have to make little adjustments.
Okay. And then I have one more question. Thank you. You referenced the Pantone color book. Do you have, like, do you suggest that we have one? And if so, where would we get that?
Okay.
From Speak Flower?
No. So I'll talk more about that tomorrow in tomorrow's lesson, the Pantone color book. I do have one, but it's not necessary for you to have.
Okay.
And the other thing is that when you pick a Pantone color book, you want to make sure that your manufacturer is using the same one. So there's different Pantone color books. For example, if they're working from the fabric color book and I'm working from the swatch book, or I'm even working from coded versus uncoded, then we're going to have different colors because we're not talking about the same number. So when you do work with a manufacturer, that's one of the first things you want to ask when you get that, you get into the manufacturing and requesting files part is, first of all, what color format do you want? RGB, CMYK, or Pantone? And if it's Pantone color separations, what are my limits of colors? And then what Pantone color guide are you using? Do you want me to match with? And that usually comes down to materials. If they're printing on fabric, it's probably going to be the textile guide. If it's print, you're probably going to use one of these formula guides. So there's different guides that you can be using. And so it's important that you're just on the same page with the manufacturer when you start that conversation. And you don't have to have Pantone guides to start with. I mean, it's literally as easy as, if I'm printing an image with an ocean at the bottom and the sun at the top, and it's a pretty simple image with two colors, I can literally make a printout or write on my file with a line and say, this is Pantone 186 for the sun, and this is Pantone 485 for the ocean. And it just means that you and the printer are on the same page. You don't have to subscribe to Pantone Connect and use that exact swatch. As long as you're using a spot color swatch in your file and you have that conversation with the printer and they know what that spot color is can be, they can change it to any ink, really. Imagine I just make a poster that's a big circle. Now I just tell the printer I want it to be Pantone 186, and they're going to print it red. Or I want it to be Pantone metallic, and they can print it metallic. But it's all about communicating what you want that color to be in your intended design. And with like CMYK, you don't have control of that exact match. It's always going to fluctuate with CMYK.
So when you have your swatches for your collection, can you have a mixture of Pantone colors in there and non-Pantone colors?
No. So when you, well, I mean, you can, like, I can start and I can have a mix of, I can pull from actually Pantone Connect swatches if I want, and I can create my own swatches from RGB if I want. But when I go to manufacture, in kind of the textile world, it's probably, you're not going to encounter a situation where you're going to be able to print with CMYK and Pantone. That's going to be very rare. It's mostly going to be spot colors, which are Pantone.
Okay.
Now, in the world of print, and let's say I'm printing a poster that has, I don't know, a picture of people surfing, let's say I'm printing a poster for a surf festival, and I have a poster of a girl surfing on a wave, and there she is, and I'm going to use that picture. That's going to be printed in CMYK. So I have a full color picture. But if I have a logo that says Oaxaca Surf Festival, and I'm using a bright neon orange for that, that neon orange will be printed in Pantone with CMYK. So in that case, in the world of print, it's often where you mix Pantone colors with CMYK. And at Color Camp, I have a little, I think a bonus at the end, where I just go through a bunch of print samples and I just talk about what they are, like what you're looking at, like how it was printed and the differences of all of that.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
Well, you're welcome. All right, Joanne, thank you for waiting so patiently.
Thank you. So going back to the colors that we were creating from the hex codes, can I maybe try and share my screen with you?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
I'll see if it'll let me. Share screen.
Yay.
Okay. So I'll just make it a wee bit bigger.
Oh, that's really pretty.
So this was the original kind of colors, and then this is how I've changed it. But would there need to be like a stronger, like I don't know if the rules, for example, but should there be like a much darker color in there and a much lighter color, or
It really depends on your usage, but I usually like to have a dark color that represents at least 80% gray. So I'm getting dark and dense with that color, which you're about there with that the darker blue. You could probably make that another version of that a little darker, you know, maybe 10% darker. And it might be closer to giving you more contrast. And then having a lighter color, I like to have a color that's about 10, 15% around in my gray value, which you have down there with that neutral about. It could go a little lighter, but it also depends on, you know, whatever our illustration is and you know, how it's applied in the pattern and that sort of thing. But I think you have a pretty nice range here of some high mid-tone values, low mid-tone values, and then a light color. And yeah, you could probably add a little bit of a darker, and then you have a nice kind of that little blue in the corner. It's kind of a nice little pop down there. And those four colors at the bottom work really well together, even by themselves as a color palette. And then the top five work really well together as a color palette. So I think you're off to a really good start here.
so there's not necessarily a kind of hard and fast rule.
No.
Okay.
No, absolutely not. You might end up with a monochrome color palette that's all basically one color, and it might have, you know, a lot of similar tones. Let's say it's a watercolor and you have a lot of similar kind of nuanced tones. And then you might just use a bright color like out of the blue to, you know, shake it up. You might use like all simple soft blues that are like a watercolor, and all of a sudden you have a pop of neon orange in there or neon pink or something. So there's no rule in terms of what belongs in the palette, but it's just kind of how you apply the color in the palette that can make a difference.
And to just to check the value of that, is that when you would go up to the grayscale? Is that the best place to
Yeah.
check?
So go there and click, no, just go click the little hamburger menu again. And wait, when you click it, can you click and hold down? I'm not seeing your menu. How weird.
Is it not showing you?
No, yeah, but it looks like you changed it to grayscale.
Oh,
So
so-
can you click your menu and go show options? There you go. So you can see it's about 18% on the grayscale. See up there?
okay.
So
Yeah.
you're right about 20%. So, I mean, like I said, you could take it a little bit lighter and you're going to be right between that like 10, 15% zone I like to be. When I'm working in print, just so everybody knows, it's, I mean, probably you'll never really be in this situation, but just to be aware of, I never really go between like 5% and lower when I'm putting color into something. It's because your dots will really start to break up and get fine if you start like doing 5% or less, you know?
Okay. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. All right, Sweeby's got a question here.
Yes, it's a very basic question. Now,
Okay.
I will have my main color, and then the other 4 colors are from the other ladies in my breakout group. So when I try and change their color to kind of fit in with my main color, do I try to get that tone from my original color?
You can, yeah, so let me show you really quick. So when you have, here are the original colors, and there's 2 different ways you can approach it. So I adjusted this darker blue here, and I'm just going to make a copy of these over here. And one thing I could do is I could start with this blue and just do it optically. I mean, that blue actually works with these blues. I'm going to just delete these for clarity right now. So I can adjust this blue by eye. Let's say I feel like if I want to take it more green, I can see here that on this side of my slider, it goes more green. And I can see over here, it goes more blue. So if I want to take it more blue, I can slide it that direction a little bit. And if I want to take it more green, which starts to have more of an underlying hue with this kind of ochre color, because they share, you know, yellow theoretically underneath that color, I can start to make those sorts of adjustments subtly. The other thing I could do is I could go here to this, I can eyedrop this other blue, and I could start to now look at this visually and try to find a similar value of that color, but I'm using this as the root color. That's another way to approach it. So around there is a similar value of this color, but this is the root color now. So there's different ways you can approach exploring the subtleties of color. You know, if I start with this here, you know, I made this yellow by adjusting this yellow, but I could also start here and I could say, maybe I want a yellow that has a different underlying hue. Maybe I want it to be slightly more orange, you know, and I can just subtly drag that. And maybe I say, I want a little bit more green into it. So it kind of starts to overlap that color I have below. Now it's getting too muddy, so I'm going to add a little bit more yellow to it. Maybe I need to take pink out of it, or see here where it looks more pink on this side and more yellow on this side. What happens if I take that pink out and make it a little bit more yellow? And you can start to see that you start to come up with a color that becomes harmonious between these colors, but it's all about adjusting those subtleties.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, does anyone else have any more questions before we wrap up? Nope. All right, it was so great to see you today. Thank you for taking the time out and joining me. Thank you for staying on and doing the exercise for those of you who did. And I will see you tomorrow at 12 p.m. as well, Pacific time, for a talk on RGB, CMYK, and Pantone color. We'll touch on all of that a little bit, which will elaborate on some of these questions that you had today. Don't forget, if you are on the fence about joining Color Camp, you can get $100 off today if you use Color Story in the code. And I'll be sending out a replay of this a little bit later this afternoon. All right, everybody, it was great to see you. Have a great day. Bye.
Bye.